I found out my wedding had been canceled the same way strangers find out about disasters, through confusion, fragments of information, and a tone in someone's voice that told me something was terribly wrong before the words even formed. "Are you okay?" the venue manager asked gently over the phone. The question caught me off guard. I stood in my bedroom, half dressed, one sleeve of my wedding dress carefully pulled over my arm while the other hung loose. I had been practicing how I would look, how I would feel, how I would breathe on the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. "I'm sorry." I let out a small, nervous laugh, trying to shake off the strange tension creeping into my chest. "What do you mean?" There was a pause on the other end. Not the kind where someone is checking notes or looking something up. This pause felt heavy, deliberate, like she was choosing her words carefully because she knew they would hurt. "Your mother called yesterday," she said finally. "She canceled everything. The hall, the catering, the decorations. She said the wedding was off." For a second, I didn't understand the sentence. It didn't land. It just floated somewhere outside of me, like a language I couldn't quite translate. "I think there's been a mistake," I said quickly, my voice suddenly too thin, too tight. "My mom wouldn't do that. There must be some confusion." "I wish that were the case," she replied softly. But she confirmed all the details. She had the booking information, the payment references, everything. "We processed the cancellation as requested." My fingers slowly loosened their grip on the fabric of my dress. The lace slipped through my hands like it didn't belong to me anymore. "No," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "No, that's not possible." "I'm really sorry," she added, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice, which somehow made it worse. "If there's anything we can do to help?" I ended the call before she could finish. The silence that followed was deafening. It pressed against my ears, wrapped around my body, filled every inch of the room. Just moments ago, this space had been full of excitement, anticipation, nervous energy. Now it felt hollow, like something essential had been ripped out of it. My eyes drifted to the mirror. There I was, standing in half a wedding dress, looking like someone caught between two realities. One where everything was still intact, and another where it had already been taken away. My heart started to race, the shock slowly giving way to something sharper. Anger, fear, disbelief. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed my mom's number. The ringing felt endless. Each second stretched longer than it should have, as if time itself was testing how much I could endure. She picked up on the third ring. "Hello." Her voice was calm. Too calm. That calmness snapped something inside me. "Why did you cancel my wedding?" I asked immediately, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound steady. There was a brief silence, followed by a soft exhale, like she had been expecting this call. "I did what needed to be done," she said. The words hit harder than any shout could have. "What does that even mean?" I demanded, my grip tightening around the phone. "You're making a mistake," she replied, her tone firm, almost rehearsed. "That man is not good enough for you. I won't stand by and watch you ruin your life." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, like the air had been squeezed out of it. "It's not your decision," I said finally, each word pushed out with effort. "I'm your mother." She shot back immediately. "Everything I do is for your own good." I closed my eyes, and suddenly it wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was every moment before this. Every time she chose my clothes, my friends, my path. Every time I convinced myself she knew better. Every time I stayed quiet to keep the peace. "No," I said, my voice shaking but rising. "Everything you do is about control." The line went quiet. I could almost picture her expression. Tight-lipped, disapproving, convinced she was right. "You'll thank me one day," she said coldly. And then she hung up. I stared at my phone, waiting for the call to come back. For her to say she didn't mean it. For this to turn into some kind of misunderstanding. But it didn't. The screen stayed dark, the room stayed silent. And the truth settled in slowly, painfully. She had done this. Not by accident, not out of confusion, but deliberately. I sank down onto the edge of my bed, the weight of it all pressing down on me. My wedding, my plans, my future. All erased with a single phone call I didn't even know was happening. Tears blurred my vision, but they didn't fall right away. Instead, they just sat there, heavy and stubborn, like even they didn't know how to process what had just happened. I looked around the room again, the dress, the shoes, the carefully chosen decorations I had brought home to admire. Every detail I had poured my heart into. Gone. Or at least, that's what it felt like. But beneath the shock, beneath the hurt, something else began to stir. A quiet, unfamiliar feeling. It wasn't loud like anger or sharp like pain. It was subtle, almost fragile, but it was there. A question. Why did she think she could do this? And a second one followed, stronger this time. Why did I let her believe she could? I wiped at my eyes, finally letting a tear slip free. This wasn't just about a cancelled wedding. This was about every boundary I had never set. Every decision I had handed over. Every part of my life I had allowed someone else to control. My chest tightened. But this time it wasn't just from hurt. It was from realization. If she could cancel my wedding without telling me, what else had I lost without even noticing? And more importantly, what would I lose next if I didn't stop her? I looked at my reflection again, really looked this time. Not at the dress. Not at the image of a bride. But at myself. For the first time, I didn't see someone preparing to start a new life. I saw someone standing at the edge of a choice. Stay the same, or finally take control. And even though my hands were still shaking, even though my heart felt like it had been torn apart, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment everything was about to change. The next few hours didn't feel real. They moved too fast and too slow at the same time, like I was trapped in a loop I couldn't escape. One moment I was staring at my phone, trying to convince myself this was some kind of misunderstanding, and the next I was dialing vendor after vendor, hoping, desperately, that at least one of them would tell me it wasn't true. But they all said the same thing. Cancelled. I'm so sorry. We received a cancellation request yesterday. Yes, everything has been released. The date is no longer reserved. Each sentence felt like another door slamming shut. Each apology sounded rehearsed, distant, final. What about the deposit? I asked one of them, my voice barely holding together. There was a pause before the answer came. It was non-refundable. Of course it was. I ended the call and let my phone fall onto the couch beside me. My hands were trembling so badly, I had to press them into my knees just to steady them. It felt like something inside me was unraveling thread by thread, and I couldn't gather it back together fast enough. All those months of planning. Every decision, every saved payment, every late night conversation with Ian about colors, music, food, gone. Wiped away like it meant nothing. The sound of my front door opening snapped me out of my spiral. Aisha. Ian's voice called out, filled with urgency. Where are you? In here? I managed. He appeared in the doorway seconds later, slightly out of breath, his eyes scanning me as if checking for damage. The moment he saw my face, something in his expression shifted, anger, concern, disbelief all at once. Tell me it's not true, he said. I swallowed hard. She cancelled everything. For a second, he just stood there, processing. Then he ran a hand through his hair and started pacing the room. She had no right, he said, his voice sharp. No right to interfere like that. I know. I whispered, staring at the floor. But she did. What can fix this? He said quickly, turning toward me. We'll call them back, explain the situation. Maybe we can rebook some of it. Or find another venue. It's not too late. His determination should have comforted me. It should have made me feel like everything would be okay. But something inside me resisted. It's not just about fixing it, I said quietly. He stopped pacing. What do you mean? I looked up at him, my chest tightening. She's been doing this my whole life. The words came out heavier than I expected, like they had been waiting for this exact moment to finally be spoken, deciding things for me, choosing what's best for me, controlling everything. I continued. And I let her. I kept telling myself it was love, that she just wanted what's best for me, but this? My voice broke slightly. This isn't love. Ian walked over and knelt in front of me, his gaze steady and grounding. No, it's not, he said firmly. And you don't have to accept it anymore. I let out a shaky breath. I don't even know where to start. Start by deciding that this is your life, he replied. Not hers. His words settled into me slowly, like something fragile trying to take root. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed loudly beside me. Then again, and again. I frowned and picked it up. Missed calls, messages, notifications flooding in faster than I could read them. My stomach dropped. Relatives, family friends, people I hadn't spoken to in months, even years. What's going on? Ian asked. They know, I said, my voice tightening. How? I don't know. I opened one of the messages. Is everything okay? We heard the wedding is cancelled. Another. Why would your mother do that? And another. Call me immediately. This is serious. It felt like my private life had been thrown into the middle of a crowded room, exposed and dissected without my permission. I can't deal with this, I muttered, placing the phone face down. Not right now. But the buzzing didn't stop. It grew louder, more persistent, like the world was demanding answers I didn't have. Ian gently picked up the phone and glanced at the screen. There's a lot. I know, I said, pressing my fingers to my temples. I feel like I'm drowning. Then another notification popped up. This one wasn't from a contact I recognized. Ian noticed it too. Who's that? I don't know, I said, hesitating before opening it. The message was simple. I heard what happened. If you still want to get married, we'll help, say. I blinked, confused. I murmured. Before I could process it, another message came in. Different name. No one deserves this. Please don't cancel your dream because of her. Then another. I'm a photographer. I'd love to help if you need it. I stared at the screen, my confusion slowly mixing with something else. What is this? Ian asked, leaning closer. I think someone shared what happened, I said slowly. Maybe online. My heart pounded as I opened a social media app. There it was. A post. My story summarized, simplified, but unmistakably mine. Someone had written about how a bride's mother canceled her wedding behind her back, and how the bride was left devastated. Thousands of people had seen it. Hundreds had commented. And many of them were reaching out. I didn't even know this was posted. I whispered, overwhelmed. Ian watched as more messages poured in. People want to help, he said quietly. I shook my head, still trying to catch up. They don't even know me? They don't have to, he replied. I looked at the screen again. Strangers offering kindness, support, help. The contrast hit me hard. My own mother had taken everything away without a second thought. And people who had never met me were trying to give something back. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't just from pain. It was something else. Something unfamiliar but warm. I don't understand, I said softly. Ian gave a small smile. Maybe you don't need to. I held the phone closer, reading another message. Don't give up. You deserve your moment. For the first time since that phone call earlier, something inside me shifted. Just slightly. Just enough to feel it. Maybe everything wasn't completely lost. Maybe this wasn't the end. But I also knew one thing clearly now. This wasn't just about putting a wedding back together. This was about something bigger. About drawing a line I had never drawn before. About deciding, finally, who got to have control over my life. And as I looked at the growing number of messages, one thought settled in, steady and undeniable. If my own family could tear me down this easily, maybe it was time to stop depending on them to hold me up. By the next morning, my phone had turned into something I barely recognized. It wasn't just a device anymore. It was a constant stream of voices, names, kindness, and disbelief all pouring into my life at once. I woke up to dozens of new messages, and for a moment, I just stared at the screen, unsure if I had the emotional strength to read any of them. But curiosity, and something softer, something hopeful, pushed me to open them. The first message I read was from a photographer. Hi, I saw your story online. I can't imagine how painful that must have been. If you still plan to go ahead with your wedding, I'd love to capture your day for free. No catch. Just want to help. I blinked, reading it twice to make sure I understood it correctly. Free. Why would someone offer something like that to a complete stranger? Before I could fully process it, another message popped up. I'm a baker. I run a small home business. Please let me make your wedding cake. You deserve something sweet after all of this. My throat tightened. Another. I have a small event space. It's not huge, but it's warm and beautiful. You can use it. No charge. I sat up slowly in bed, my heart starting to beat faster, not from anxiety this time, but from something I hadn't felt since before everything fell apart. Possibility. Ayan, I called out, my voice still soft but urgent. He appeared in the doorway a few seconds later, holding 2 cups of coffee. You're up. Look at this, I said, holding out my phone. He walked over and sat beside me, his shoulder brushing against mine as he read through the messages. I watched his expression change, surprise, then disbelief, then something like quiet amazement. Wow, he murmured. This is incredible. I don't understand it, I admitted. Why are they doing this? He shrugged slightly, but there was a warmth in his eyes. Because they can. Because they want to. I kept scrolling. A decorator offering to handle the entire setup. A makeup artist volunteering her services. Someone offering to arrange flowers. Even a musician who said they'd perform live if needed. Each message felt like a small light turning on in a space that had gone completely dark just hours ago. This doesn't feel real, I said quietly. It is, Ian replied. And you deserve it? That word again. Deserve. It felt strange hearing it in this context. For so long, I had associated worth with approval, my mother's approval, specifically. If she didn't agree with something, it automatically felt wrong, like I had failed some invisible standard. But these people, they didn't know me. They didn't know my history, my flaws, my fears. And yet, they believed I deserved something beautiful. That thought alone was enough to make my chest ache. I clicked back onto the post that had started it all. The comments had grown overnight, hundreds of people reacting, sharing their own stories, offering support. Some were angry on my behalf, as no parent has the right to control their child like that. Some were encouraging. Please don't give up your wedding. You'll regret it if you let her win. And some were deeply personal. I went through something similar. It took me years to stand up for myself. You're stronger than you think, see. I swallowed hard, my eyes stinging slightly. I didn't realize how many people go through this, I said. Ian nodded. More than we think. Most just don't talk about it. Another message came in as I was reading. We're organizing a small group of volunteers who want to help you pull this off. If you're open to it, we can coordinate everything. Say, I stared at the screen, my heart racing again. They're organizing, I said, almost in disbelief. Ian let out a soft laugh. You've got a whole team now. I shook my head slowly. 200 strangers, I whispered. 200 people who don't even know me, and they're showing up like this. The number felt surreal. And then, without warning, my thoughts drifted to my mother. The contrast hit me so hard it was almost physical. The woman who raised me, who was supposed to support me no matter what, had taken everything away without hesitation. And these strangers, these people with no obligation, no connection. They were giving. Freely. Without conditions. It made something inside me shift, deep and undeniable. Maybe family wasn't what I had always believed it to be. Maybe it wasn't just about blood, or history, or obligation. Maybe it was about presence. About who stands beside you when everything falls apart. About who chooses you, even when they don't have to. I think, I started, then stopped. What? Ian asked gently. I took a deep breath. I think I want to do it. A slow smile spread across his face. The wedding. Yes, I said, my voice growing steadier. But not the way it was before. Not under her control. Not with her expectations. I looked back at the messages, at the overwhelming support that had appeared out of nowhere. This time, it's going to be ours. I continued. Our decisions. Our choices. Our way. Ian reached for my hand and squeezed it. I'm with you. For the first time since everything happened, I felt something solid beneath my feet again. Not certainty, not completely. But direction. Purpose. I started replying to the messages one by one. Thank you. That was the first thing I typed, over and over again. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your support. Thank you for believing in me. Each response felt like a small step forward, like I was rebuilding something piece by piece, not just the wedding, but myself. Hours passed without me noticing. The chaos from yesterday had transformed into something else entirely. A plan. A new kind of beginning. At some point, I paused and looked around the room again. The dress was still there, the shoes, the little details I thought had lost their meaning. But now, they felt different. They weren't reminders of something that had been taken from me. They were part of something I was choosing to reclaim. I stood up slowly and walked over to the dress, running my fingers over the fabric again. This time, it didn't feel like it was slipping away. It felt like it belonged to me. And as I stood there, surrounded by the echoes of what had been and the promise of what could be, one thought settled into my heart with quiet certainty. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Not in the way that mattered. Because somewhere out there, 200 people had decided that my story didn't end with loss. It continued with strength. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to believe that too. The wedding day arrived faster than I thought it would, as if time itself had decided to stop dragging its feet and start moving with purpose. In the days leading up to it, everything had been a blur of messages, planning, coordination, and emotions that shifted from overwhelming to hopeful and back again. But when I woke up that morning, there was a strange calm in my chest. Not the kind of calm that comes from everything being perfect. The kind that comes from knowing you've fought for something, and you're about to step into it. For a moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the reality of the day settle in. I was getting married. Not the way I had imagined months ago. Not with the grand hall, or the carefully curated guest list, or the approval I once thought I needed. But in a way that felt more honest. More mine. My phone buzzed softly on the bedside table. I reached for it and saw a flood of messages already waiting. "Good morning, bride. Today is your day. We're setting up the decorations, don't worry about a thing. The cake is ready. I hope you love it." I smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. These people, they had shown up. Not just with words, but with action. I got ready slowly, almost carefully, as if I wanted to feel every second of it. The makeup artist, another stranger who had become something more, arrived right on time, greeting me with warmth that instantly put me at ease. "You look nervous," she said gently as she set up her kit. "I think I'm more overwhelmed," I admitted. She smiled. "That's okay. Today isn't about perfection. It's about love." Her words settled into me as she worked, each brushstroke, each detail, grounding me further into the moment. There was no rush, no pressure to meet impossible expectations. Just quiet focus and an understanding that this day mattered, not because of how it looked, but because of what it meant. When I finally stepped into my dress, my hands trembled slightly. For a split second, the memory of that phone call tried to creep back in, the moment everything had been taken away. But it didn't stay. Because this time, nothing had been taken. This time, everything had been rebuilt. "You're ready?" someone said softly behind me. I turned and saw the woman who had offered the venue standing in the doorway. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. Emotion tightened in my chest. "I don't even know how to thank you." She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "You don't have to. Just be happy. That's enough. Just be happy." It sounded simple. But for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. When we arrived at the venue, I paused just outside the entrance. I could hear laughter inside, soft music playing, the low hum of voices blending together into something warm and inviting. It wasn't a crowd of strangers anymore. It was something else. Something I hadn't expected to find in the middle of all this chaos. A sense of belonging. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The space wasn't extravagant, but it was beautiful in a way that felt alive. Flowers, carefully arranged, lined the aisle. Soft lights cast a golden glow across the room. Every detail, no matter how small, carried intention, and then I saw them. People turning toward me, smiling, some clapping softly, others with tears in their eyes. 200 faces. Not one of them familiar in the way family is supposed to be. And yet, in that moment, they didn't feel like strangers at all. They felt like something I had been missing for a long time. Support. Ian stood at the end of the aisle, waiting. The moment my eyes met his, everything else faded into the background. The noise, the movement, the weight of everything that had led up to this day. It all quieted. "You made it," he said softly as I reached him. There was emotion in his voice, the kind that doesn't need to be explained. I shook my head slightly, a small smile forming. No, we made it. Because it was true. This wasn't just my fight. It was ours. The ceremony itself felt almost surreal. The officiant spoke, but the words blended into something deeper than just a script. When it was time for our vows, my heart pounded so loudly I thought everyone might hear it. But when I looked at Ian, the nerves didn't disappear, they transformed into certainty. Used to think love meant compromise. I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion. I thought it meant adjusting, staying quiet, keeping peace even when it cost me something. I paused, taking a breath. But you taught me something different. I continued. You showed me that love doesn't take away your voice, it gives it strength. And standing here today, I'm not just choosing you, I'm choosing myself too. His eyes softened, and I could see the emotion he was trying not to let spill over. I choose a life where I'm not controlled, not silenced, not afraid, I said. And I'm so grateful that life includes you. By the time I finished, my hands were trembling, but not from fear. From the weight of truth finally spoken out loud. When he said his vows, there was a quiet intensity in every word, a promise not just of love, but of partnership, of respect, of standing beside me no matter what came next. And when we finally said, I do, it didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning of everything. The applause that followed was loud, genuine, full of life. People cheered, some wiped away tears, others laughed as if they had known us forever. And maybe, in a strange way, they did. Because they had seen me at my lowest. And they had chosen to stand with me anyway. As the celebration continued, I moved through the room, thanking people, hugging those who had become more than just names on a screen. Each interaction felt real, grounded, meaningful. You deserve this, one woman told me, squeezing my hands. We're so happy for you, another said, her eyes shining. At some point, I stepped back and just watched. Watched the laughter, the conversations, the joy filling the space. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like something was missing. I didn't feel the absence I had been so afraid of. Instead, I felt something stronger. Freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, unshakable. Because this day wasn't perfect. But it was real, it was mine. And as I stood there, surrounded by people who had chosen to be part of this moment, one thought settled into my heart with quiet certainty. This wasn't the wedding I had planned, but it was the one I was meant to have. The celebration was still alive with laughter and music when I felt it, that subtle shift in the air, like a quiet ripple moving through the room. It wasn't loud enough to stop anything, but it was enough to make people glance toward the entrance, their expressions changing just slightly. I didn't need to turn around to know why. Something in me already knew. But I turned anyway, and there she was. My mother stood near the doorway, perfectly composed, dressed as if she had been invited all along. Her posture was straight, her chin slightly lifted, her eyes scanning the room with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. For a moment, she didn't move. She just stood there, taking it all in, the decorations, the guests, the life that had gone on without her permission. The noise around me faded into the background. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. Ian's hand brushed against mine. Do you want me to? No, I said softly, though my voice was steady in a way that surprised even me. It's okay. Because somehow it was. She began to walk toward me slowly, each step deliberate, measured. People noticed her now, conversations lowering into murmurs, but no one stepped in. No one interrupted. This was something I had to face. Alone. When she finally stood in front of me, there was a brief silence that stretched longer than it should have. Up close, she looked exactly the same as she always had, controlled, certain, unwavering. You went through with it, she said. There was no warmth in her voice, no apology. Just a statement, flat and almost disapproving. Yes, I replied. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look away. For the first time in my life, I met her gaze without shrinking. Her eyes flickered slightly, as if she hadn't expected that. You embarrassed me, she said next. The words might have broken me once. They might have sent me spiraling into guilt, into that familiar need to fix things, to make it right, to earn back her approval. But not anymore. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of everything I had been through settle into something solid inside me. No, I said calmly. You tried to control me. I chose myself. The shift in her expression was subtle, but I saw it. A crack in the certainty she always carried. A moment of something she couldn't quite hide. You're being disrespectful, she replied, her tone sharpening slightly. I almost smiled. Not out of mockery. But because I recognized it, that word had been her weapon for years. Disrespectful, ungrateful, difficult. Labels she used whenever I stepped even slightly outside the boundaries she had set for me. But standing there, in that moment, surrounded by people who had supported me without conditions, the word lost its power. I'm being honest, I said. There's a difference. She looked around the room then, really looking this time. At the people talking, laughing, celebrating. At the decorations that had been put together without her. At the life that had continued without her approval. This isn't how things are supposed to be, she said, more to herself than to me. A quiet understanding settled over me. For her, this wasn't just about the wedding. It was about control. About the version of me she had always believed she owned. And the realization that she no longer did. Maybe not, I said gently. But it's how things are now. She turned back to me, her gaze searching, as if trying to find something familiar, something she could still hold on to. You'll regret this, she said. I held her gaze, steady and unshaken. No, I replied. I would have regretted letting you decide my life for me. Silence fell between us again, heavier this time. There was nothing left for her to argue with. No opening to push through, no hesitation for her to exploit. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for her reaction. I wasn't trying to anticipate her response or soften my words to avoid conflict. I was simply standing. In my truth, in my choice, in myself. Her shoulders stiffened slightly, and I saw it then, not anger, not exactly. Loss, not the loss of me, but the loss of control over me. Without another word, she stepped back. For a brief second, I thought she might say something else. Apologize, maybe. Or at least acknowledge what she had done. But she didn't. She turned and walked away. Just like that, no dramatic exit, no final argument, just a quiet retreat. And I didn't follow her. I didn't call her back. I didn't feel that familiar pull to fix what had just happened. Because there was nothing left to fix. The chapter of my life where I needed her approval had already ended. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding, my body relaxing in a way it hadn't in years. Ian stepped closer, his presence grounding me instantly. Are you okay? I nodded, and this time it was real. Yeah, I said softly. I am, and I meant it. Because what I felt in that moment wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger, it was something else entirely. Relief, freedom. A quiet kind of peace that didn't need validation to exist. I turned back toward the room, toward the people who had stayed, who had shown up, who had chosen to be part of this moment. Laughter filled the space again, music rising, conversations picking back up as if the interruption had only been a passing shadow. But something had changed. Not in the room. In me. I walked back into the crowd, and someone immediately pulled me into a hug. You okay? She asked gently. I smiled, wrapping my arms around her. Better than okay, I said, because I was. For so long I had believed that being underestimated, controlled, or dismissed made me weak. That enduring it quietly was strength. That keeping the peace was more important than speaking up. But now I understood something different. Being underestimated was never the end of the story. It was the beginning. The moment before you decide who you really are. The moment before you stop shrinking and start standing. The moment before you become unstoppable. I looked around the room again, at the faces that had become something like family in the span of days. Not because of obligation, but because of choice. And for the first time, that felt more real than anything I had ever known. I wasn't losing a mother in that moment. I was gaining something far more important. Myself. And as the music played and laughter surrounded me, I realized something with complete clarity. I was exactly where I was meant to be.